Hello and welcome to today's Lux Research webinar. My name is Kevin C. I'm a VP of Research here at Lux, and I lead our overall digital research. And I'll be moderating today's webinar. Today our speaker is Danny Bradman, who leads our coverage in digital health and wellness. If you have any questions today, please enter them into the question box on your screen, and we'll have time to answer some questions at the end of the presentation. But before that, we want to give you a little bit of information about Lux. Our mission is really to help our clients innovate more effectively by evaluating emerging technologies and their commercialization potential going forward. There are a few ways to work with us. The first primary way is that we generate a tremendous amount of content around technology, including startup profiles, technology landscapes, and market assessments, all of which are available through access to our Lux platform. Secondly, we build on top of that by enabling direct access to our experts. They're trained in science and engineering and are experts in their areas and can give you deeper insights beyond just the content that we write. And finally, this interaction often leads to bespoke projects where clients need to solve specific problems such as market entry strategies or partner search and selection. And here we have a dedicated consulting team that's well-versed in solving these types of problems and executing these types of projects. In terms of the program that today's research comes from, it's focused on emerging digital technologies. And there are four key themes to what we research in our group. One is really tracking and evaluating the emergence and differentiation in fundamental emerging digital technologies like artificial intelligence and the Internet of Things. A lot of hype. So we spend a lot of time trying to understand what the real capabilities are to separate the promising things from the hypes. We build on top of this to look at those emerging digital technologies in three key use cases or applications. The first is Industry 4.0, where we're looking to emerging digital technologies to really create efficiency, cost reduction, unifying supply chain and manufacturing. But it's hard to extract ROI from these technologies. So we track the key players, the solutions, the capabilities to ensure that we know what the best options are. The other pillar is smart and connected products and services, where AI and IoT can really unlock new value, new business models that leverage sensors, leverage analytics, leverage AI to really create that new value and generate new business models. And the last one we want to look at is innovation itself. So we work predominantly with people who are involved in innovating, and that is groups like R&D and innovation. And we find that these groups are in the midst of transformation themselves. So we can use these same digital tools like NLP and informatics and more to help us find white space, understand trends and key players, and really work more efficiently towards the solution we want to put into the market. And now, to build on this theme of smart and connected products and services, I'd like to introduce Danny Bradman. She's going to talk about the opportunity for these emerging digital tools in serving the aging global population.
Thank you, Kevin, for that excellent introduction. Today, as Kevin has just pointed out, we'll be exploring some business opportunities in a rapidly aging global population. But before I hop into this real quickly, I think it would be remiss of me to not acknowledge the global pandemic we're currently undergoing. Is particularly key for aging populations as they are predominantly the at-risk category for COVID-19, but also a lot of the technologies I'll be talking about today have a really strong impact on populations of all age groups. And so I'll try to highlight some of those as we move through this webinar. So the agenda for today is to look at how aging populations represent a growing business opportunity. We'll use the Lux created healthcare spectrum to really identify these specific opportunities. And finally, I'll demonstrate how to develop solutions for aging populations. So to start, aging populations represent an enormous business opportunity. The world is getting older on average, and with the rise of the super age society, defined as 20% of the population older the age of 65, we're starting to see more opportunity for these aging demographics. So in 2015, 3 out of the oldest countries on the planet already fit this definition of super aged, but in the next 10 years, by 2030, we're really anticipating that 8 out of these 10 countries will hit this mark. Now, if you've historically been a company that's focused on these younger demographics, like individuals in their 20s, 30s, and 40s, this may be a little concerning for you. However, if you spend time addressing aging populations, you have built-in growth for your target demographic. Your addressable market size is really only expanding. So how do you really begin to address this market size? Well, first and foremost, it's important to acknowledge that the way we typically think of aging populations today is broken up into a pretty distinct binary of individuals who are either extremely healthy and living lives identical to 20-year-olds apparently, or very ill populations. And this is highly problematic because this binary really hides the real business opportunity to be had here. Most individuals are in fact healthy well over their 70s, and most are only sick towards the last 10 to 11 years of their lives. However, aging populations do have specific needs for their age group, and very few solutions actually cater to those needs within their everyday lives. This represents a hundreds of billions of dollar opportunity, if not trillion-dollar opportunity. And I'd like to say that again because it's actually quite impressive. This is a trillion-dollar opportunity that would solve some significant unmet needs. So how do you identify a specific opportunity? Well, we're going to take a look using the Lux Healthcare Spectrum. First and foremost, Lux thinks that health needs to be viewed as a spectrum, not a binary. One of the key challenges that we see in the healthcare industry today is that companies are very interested in either sticking to healthy or severe disease states, sometimes under the aegis of non-regulatory concerns versus heavy regulatory hurdles. But the reality is there's actually a spectrum to be addressed within that, not just healthy and severe disease, but also at-risk pre-disease and disease populations. And when we look at this and we apply it to aging populations, what we're really talking about is, as we move from left to right, decreasing independence and mobility and increasing symptoms of disease. And you have to ask yourself, do current tech solutions really address this spectrum? So what we're going to do is look at the key technologies that are being used today and apply them to the spectrum. There are 5 different digital technologies that really dominate the innovation landscape for elderly care today. However, in the interest of time, I'm really only going to focus on these 3: wearable devices, smart textiles, and AR/VR. If you do have questions about the other 2, smart homes and artificial intelligence, please don't hesitate to reach out. So to begin with our first technology, wearable devices. Wearable devices are arguably the most mainstream of digital health tools today, and wearable devices can play a significant role in elderly care today. The image on the left, the fabulous Iris Apfel, is demonstrating her particular preference for the company Wiseware, which develops a product specifically for aging individuals who are interested in tracking their health with style. However, the vast majority of tools, like smart clips and smart watches, are used for senior monitoring and are often less snazzy. So on the left, we have the example of the Go Live Clip, which is a wearable activity tracker that tracks what you can typically consider fitness metrics, things like how many steps have you taken, your activity throughout the day. And then on the right, Great Call has an admittedly attractive fall monitoring device, but it's still a fall monitoring device for highly, ill populations. So when we map these 2 types of wearables on the healthcare spectrum, you see very much that Go Live Clip is all the way to the left in the healthy spectrum, and Great Call is much closer to the disease and severe disease state. When we look at our second technology in our toolbox, smart textiles, we can see that smart textiles can often track various parameters in an everyday form factor, similar to wearables, but with a few other key benefits. Smart textiles can monitor vital signs, but also signs of deviation from normal behavior in the elderly. They come in a variety of form factors. Sensing Text creates a mat that can be placed in a bed to detect ulcer hotspots. It also currently has applications for monitoring respiration, cough, and different sounds for COVID-19, and these are often deployed in things like nursing homes. In contrast, Sensoria makes smart garments with embedded sensors, including types of socks that can be used to detect also ulcers, but additionally location and falls. And when we plot these technologies along the healthcare spectrum, we kind of see a repetition of what we saw earlier. at both the healthy and severe disease states. Our third technology, AR/VR, is one that's typically used right now in gaming, although in elderly care, AR/VR can be used for emotional well-being and mental health. In fact, I'd also like to point out that it's seeing a bit of a spike in activity right now due to COVID-19, because even individuals from any demographic are really looking for ways to connect with others, and AR and VR technologies are making this really possible. But when it comes to elder care specifically, one of the keys is that virtual reality lets elders really share experiences. So the company Rendeavor develops a VR program specifically to give elders the ability to engage with others and experience travel. So you can visit Paris with your loved ones if you never got to when you were younger. In contrast, TribeMix on the right offers a soothing therapeutic for individuals who are struggling with dementia, which is less about travel and experience and more about having a calm environment in which to exist. But again, when we map these technologies on our healthcare spectrum, we see once again, we're very much in this binary appearance. And when you map the 5 key digital health tools on the health spectrum, which I know I didn't get to today in the interest of time, but I thought it was worth to demonstrate where they lay on the spectrum, you do see this pretty impressive gap. There's a substantial gap in the middle. At-risk and pre-disease populations are still largely a hugely underexplored opportunity. So when we go back to that initial question that we asked, do current tech solutions address the spectrum? The answer really is absolutely not. We're not applying the spectrum to aging populations. Instead, what we're actually doing is succumbing to a binary that does not serve the entirety of a population, and more importantly, from a business perspective, really blinds us to these incredibly lucrative opportunities. So now that I've explained that aging populations represent a growing business opportunity and how to really identify where there are opportunities, how do you develop solutions for aging populations? To answer that question, what you really need to think about is how can you address the whole spectrum? And that is really by remembering that aging itself is not a problem to be solved, but a life stage that transcends clinical care. If 70 is the new 40, seniors are pretty much living like everyone else and have the same needs, such as careers and jobs, social needs, autonomy and mobility, and food and nutrition. The key really is, instead of looking at the binary, is you want to focus on the left of the care spectrum. The majority of this segment are not experiencing symptoms, they're largely independent. And really what you're trying to do is focus on the left side of the spectrum in order to keep individuals on the left side of the spectrum. Earlier support makes for better long-term outcomes so that hopefully you never make it to the disease and severe disease states. So what does a winning strategy look like? Well, to start with, a key way to make an impact is to start by picking a healthcare vertical. Often, ironically, this looks a lot like a disease, which is in contrast to what I've been saying for this webinar. But the trick is not to think in terms of solving the disease, but instead on focusing on providing the necessary support for prevention. Of the verticals you can pick, Lux covers a number of them. And for the purposes of this webinar, I'm going to focus on mental health. So why mental health? Mental health represents an enormous market in the hundreds of billions, if not trillions of dollars. The market is largely underrepresented, with the vast majority of funding going towards younger demographics. And finally, and perhaps most importantly, mental health is an almost universal comorbidity. So if you're not familiar with the medical term comorbidity, what that really means is a disease state that's in parallel to another. So think about things like anxiety and diabetes, or depression and cardiovascular disease. And by tapping into mental health, you're able to really approach a number of other conditions. So how do you develop solutions for mental health? Well, there's a number of ways to do it, many of which we're not going to have time to address here. But today I'd like to focus on 2, supporting a healthy lifestyle and preventing and prolonging healthy years. So to begin with supporting a healthy lifestyle, even though it doesn't seem like it's a direct approach to mental health, covering the basics like nutrition, exercise, sleep, and safety also really impact your mental health. So how are companies dealing with this now? Well, there's a current strategy now that we're seeing by major players like Nestle, which is to say using available information, food options can be crafted for seniors in terms of taste preferences and nutritional requirements. But really looking forward at some emerging technologies, you can really look to develop omics type solutions to develop specific nutrition needs. And when I say omics, I mean things like genomics and leveraging the microbiome to really improve not only quality of life from a physical standpoint, but also a mental one. For exercise and sleep, the strategy now is largely through smart bedding and a little bit on those disease monitoring socks that I showed you earlier. But smart bedding really offers this ability to monitor sleep in terms of how well a body can recover, but specifically for elders in terms of monitoring sleep patterns, given that the key identifier for whether or not an individual will be placed in an elder care facility is the disruption of circadian rhythm. So if you can identify early those disruptions, you can prolong the healthy years and really prevent that entry into a home. Later on, one of the key strategies to look at is refining some of the current smart textile options, as many of them are really not ready yet and are targeting more athletic opportunities, but putting them in as part of an ecosystem that can help inform things like nutrition choices as well as rest will be really key moving forward. When it comes to the prevention of illness and the prolongation of healthy years, really the key things to look at are early detection, prevention, and early treatment. And that early detection and early treatment really gives patients a sense of hope, which is really key to maintaining a positive outlook and a good mental health level. So when it comes to early detection, we're right now at the forefront of some really exciting things happening in terms of digital biomarkers. Using existing AI technology to improve diagnostic protocols, companies like Winterlight Labs are able to diagnose dementia 10 to 15 years earlier than traditional methods. And right now, what we're seeing is a lot of digital therapeutics companies moving into that space. So there's this opportunity for a later strategy to start investing now in more sensitive digital biomarkers that can really move the needle into even earlier timeframes for diagnosing difficult and really difficult to identify conditions. When it comes to treatment, right now there's a number of digital therapeutics that are currently on offer from startups that are really excellent opportunities for engagement because they can provide significant clinical care without the use of a physician. And having that ability to provide remote treatment for mental health conditions is especially key right now during the social isolation period due to COVID-19. But when it comes to thinking about the broader picture and how to develop a way of thinking and strategies for later, what's really coming to the front of mind is this idea of developing new digital therapeutics and combining them with digital biomarkers so that you develop this kind of one-stop shop of diagnostics and therapeutics, which can be really, really powerful for a number of different populations, not just the elderly. So now that I've outlined a little bit of a strategy, I think it's important to understand really where are we headed as a whole. And a really good example of that we have right now is the in development Panasonic's Fujisawa City. So this city has been designed to cater specifically to the needs of elders and integrates many of the technologies described here in this webinar. But most importantly, it describes technologies as part of a holistic ecosystem, which is really key for thinking about the future because this holistic style ecosystem is something that is able to really target seniors across the entirety of the healthcare spectrum. What I'd like to get into now are just the key takeaways. If you get nothing else from this webinar, these are the top 3 to take away from this presentation. 1, older adults represent a significant business opportunity, as most solutions for the elderly today tackle the extreme ends of the spectrum, either disease or healthy. 2, current solutions really do not address elders along the entire spectrum of care, and our data really indicates that preventative and predictive care is an untapped opportunity. So you should really be focusing your efforts here as you think about finding new unexplored areas in which to operate. And 3, develop solutions that plug into senior needs specific ecosystems. To win big, you need to think beyond healthcare because aging is not purely a healthcare matter. And if you look at an entire ecosystem of solutions, you're really setting yourself up for long-term success. And with that, thank you for attending this webinar, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Danny. That was great. We do have several questions coming in right now, so we're going to jump right into those. As a reminder, please enter any questions you have in the questions box as we go. The first question is, what do you think the boom in telehealth from COVID-19 is going to mean for aging populations?
I think that's a really great question, Kevin, and it's something that we're seeing a lot of client interest in right now, especially as telehealth is kind of having its day in the sun. I think what we're really seeing for aging populations is not so much this real push to, say that elders can't quite pay attention or can't quite learn how to use these telehealth solutions, but we're seeing companies start to be more sensitive to the needs of elders as they engage with them. So things like making sure that there's good education surrounding how to use a service, or making sure that the websites are incredibly user-friendly. But I think stepping back from the traditional perception of telehealth, that moving beyond video consultation is really key here, because there's this opportunity to do a lot of remote monitoring, which still falls under the heading of telehealth, to really track seniors, make sure that they're living healthy long-term lives. And I think what COVID-19 has really done is jumpstart these opportunities for a lot of different organizations.
Okay. The next question is more technology specific, about wearables and whether you see them playing a role in the COVID-19 situation for seniors.
Another great question. And in that case, that's actually absolutely true. We've seen a number of really successful case studies of elder care facilities and individuals who are monitoring their loved ones using wearables specifically for contact tracing. And I think that one of the things to really point out about contact tracing here is that there's really two good use cases for it. There's either the huge population level or the tiny controlled level. So while we've been seeing, a lot of talk about using these kinds of wearables to re-enter the workforce, it's actually not a really great fit. But instead, these senior living facilities are this tremendous opportunity because they're very closed ecosystems, and you're able to really track the spread of disease and really snip it in the bud. So the use of wearables among seniors for COVID-19 has actually really opened up this enormous market for wearables with seniors in what has historically been a super, super price sensitive elder care market. And so I think that's really the biggest impact that we've seen so far due to COVID-19.
Next up is, how do you see cultural values across different geographies impacting adoption of different technologies?
I think that's another great question. And I think I'm glad it's come up, just because one of the things we try to do here at Lux is make sure that we're hammering all geographies in terms of identifying where the opportunities lie. And what we've really seen is there's a significant difference between what you see as acceptable in terms of aging and elder care, and where advances have started to get implemented between APAC regions versus the United States. So one of the major cultural differences we're seeing is there's a lot of emphasis on elder care in, say, Japan, where there's particular government initiatives and a lot more opportunities for startups to really jump into this space. Whereas in the US, it's been a lot slower. There's also a lot of differences in terms of how we perceive elders and elder care that I think are really important for companies to consider as they start to enter into this space.
Where do you see opportunities for other chronic conditions in dealing with the elderly?
Oh, I think one of the ones I think is really key and important to really address is at this intersection of the elderly and femtech right now. So what we're starting to see, and what I guess what I'd say actually we've been seeing over the past couple of years, is this rise of healthcare technology solutions targeted at female populations. And really, if you look at the intersection of where there's a lot of unmet needs between femtech and solving things for aging populations, menopause has really been this largely unmet need for a number of basically social reasons. And so what we've actually started to see is this really interesting rise of things like wearables for treating hot flashes and new material configurations to deal with skin sensitivity issues that are really powerful. I actually was lucky enough to talk to a startup shortly before putting together this webinar that works on bracelets for reducing body temperature. And it's a really neat thing that just in the last year or so of them being able to offer products, not only are they revenue positive, which is often a challenge for startups in healthcare, but they're pretty significantly profitable. And so it's exciting to see that this historical gap in healthcare, when you plot along the spectrum, is actually starting to yield results for real companies.
Great. Thanks a lot, Danny. That's all the time that we've got today. If you do have any questions that we didn't get to, please email us directly at questions@luxresearchinc.com and we'll get back to you. You can also follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter, or follow our blog at luxresearchinc.com for ongoing information and insights. Thanks a lot for joining us. Thanks again to you, Danny, and have a great day, everyone.